My name is Sylvia Farbstein, and I am a member of the board of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond. Thank you all for joining us today as we learn more about the governor's Anti-Semitism Committee recommendations and the fight against rising anti-Semitism. Though it might seem obvious, we all know what anti-Semitism is, right? What we are going to examine today is how we define anti-Semitism for ourselves and for the general community. While Jews make up less than 2% of the US population, the FBI reports that Jews account for close to 60% of religious bias hate crimes. Numbers can be overwhelming to process, so we are hosting this event today as a chance to zero in on what the state of Virginia is doing to address this growing threat. In Richmond, this has been expressed as propaganda and vandalism, including recent flyers claiming that Kanye West was right about the Jews controlling Hollywood with their money. And the same week, flyers claiming that Putin's communism is a Jewish scheme. We are grateful to Governor Youngkin for taking these local, regional, and national threats seriously and forming a commission on anti-Semitism. The goal of the commission was to develop an actionable plan to combat anti-Semitism in the Commonwealth. The commission completed their report on December 5th. Today, we will hear recommendations proposed by the commission, especially concerning the definition of anti-Semitism. This is an opportunity to engage members of the Governor's Anti-Semitism Commission, as well as Jewish Federations of North America, JFNA, to better understand recommendations made in the recent report, including the adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA, definition of anti-Semitism, which you might have noticed on the screen earlier. We will start off with our first speaker, Rabbi Eric Fussfield, who will be asked a few questions by the moderator, and we will have time for questions from the audience. We will then have Adam Teitelbaum from JFNA answer questions by the moderator, followed by a few questions of attendees. But first, a few housekeeping issues. We will open up the chat box towards the end of the program for your questions and comments. They will be selected by moderators as time permits. The event should conclude at 1:15, and this webinar is being recorded in the event that you want to share it or you need to leave early. We are so grateful to have some amazing speakers with us today. Rabbi Eric Fussfield is a member of Governor Youngkin's Anti-Semitism Commission and served on the commission's Defining Anti-Semitism Committee. Rabbi Fussfield has served as Deputy Director of B'nai B'rith Center for Human Rights and Public Policy since 2007, and as Director of Legislative Affairs for B'nai B'rith International since 2003. He has met with various heads of government, foreign ministers, and ambassadors, has frequently been interviewed and featured by various media, has also testified before several government bodies in the United States and abroad. The next speaker, Adam Teitelbaum, serves as the Jewish Federations of North America's Director of Israel Action Network and is the Associate Vice President who has been leading pro-Israel activism for more than a decade. Most recently, he has served as AIPAC's Leadership Development Director. Adam is also a member of the 4th cohort of the Schusterman Fellowship. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and co-chair of this event, Amy Melnick-Scharf, to moderate today's discussion. Amy is chair of the Jewish Community Relations Committee, JCRC, here in Richmond, Virginia. Take it away, Amy.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Really appreciate that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Rabbi Fussfield and Adam, for being with us today. This is, we hope, the first of many community conversations. We're so thrilled that so many from our community were able to join us today. It's interesting, when we scheduled this conversation to focus on the Governor's Anti-Semitism Commission, we really wanted to focus on the work of the commission, the need to define anti-Semitism, and the use of the IHRA definition, and possibly likely legislation in this coming General Assembly. But we didn't realize the Washington Post would actually highlight today, I think it's the front page, although I looked at it online, the fact that anti-Semitism, we've seen this through FBI statistics, but there's now even more evidence that the recent ADL survey that shows that, quote, anti-Semitism in its classical fascist form is emerging again in American society, where Jews are too secretive, this is a quote from the survey, are too secretive and powerful, working against interests of others, not sharing values, exploiting the classic conspiratorial tropes. This is, of course, incredibly distressing, but our conversation today is going to focus on, here in Virginia, how grateful we are that our current administration is taking these threats seriously, and that the governor's report had some very substantive recommendations of what we can do about it. So I'm going to start with Rabbi Fussfield, and wanted to just kind of lay some groundwork for our conversation. If you could just provide us some perspective about your participation on the commission, your sort of in the trenches perspective of serving on the commission. What was that like? Give us a little flavor of your overall experience.
Well, sure. And thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's really a great opportunity to meet with all of you today. My experience on the commission was very positive, and I really, the idea, first of all, I think a lot of us were excited that Governor Youngkin took this initiative on his first day in office, no less. I mean, really establishing, signaling that fighting anti-Semitism is a day one priority for his administration. And so it was really a great initiative on his part. And, you know, the commission that he assembled is a mix of experts from different sectors, you know, law enforcement, academia, government relations, and Jewish organizations. And so it was really a great experience to be able to interact with people with different forms of expertise, people representing different sectors, but all united in their determination to confront anti-Semitism. And you know, another part of this that I really want to emphasize is the nonpartisan, kind of no nonsense atmosphere that this commission generated, because I think that people, you know, in our private lives, we're all Democrats or Republicans or independents. That was all irrelevant here. People hung their partisanship at the door and really sat down and tried to do the pragmatic work of constructing public policy approaches to addressing the problem. So I found it to be a very positive experience, and I think those of us who served on the commission are proud of the recommendations that we produced, and you know, now comes the harder work of implementing those recommendations. And you know, we'll need you know, a lot of work will need to go into doing that. But you know, I think it's been I think it's been a good experience so far, and you know, the first line of credit goes to the governor for starting this commission.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you, and emphasize that as somebody who attended some of the commission meetings, and I know the director of JCRC, Basia Gartenstein, who couldn't be with us today, she attended all of the meetings. Although I will note it was sometimes a little challenging to have advance notice of the meetings. I know one of our hallmarks of how the Federation does our work is to be transparent, and we were encouraging community involvement. It was a bit challenging to have the public involved in the commission meetings, and I did want to ask if that was sort of intentional, or was it just sort of the decision of the commission, or just the way that it turned out?
Well, that aspect of the commission's business, I could tell you, was not dictated by commission members, because the commission, it's appointed by the governor. It's governed by FOIA regulations, public disclosure regulations, which mean first of all, every meeting that took place was done out in the open, and members of the public were invited, even meetings that took place online. Now, if you know, if not enough advance notice was given to really, you know, encourage greater attendance by the public, I think this is more a logistical consideration. There was no effort made to exclude members of the public. That I know for sure. I think we were all working within a tight time frame, and so meetings had to take place on a regular basis, and they were all advertised at least 1 week ahead of time. That's the requirement. I will say this is just kind of an interesting anecdotal note. The problem, the challenge of making every meeting out in the open, presented some logistical difficulties for those of us serving on the commission doing the work. Because, for example, I chaired one of the commission's subcommittee meetings, and we could not convene even a Zoom meeting. I think the laws were changed at the end of August, governing. I don't want to get too much into detail, but the one subcommittee meeting that took place required me driving out to the house of another commission member, because at least 2 of us had to be in the same room. And then the third one joined us by Zoom, and then public members joined by Zoom too. But we had to be very good. We couldn't even communicate with each other. There were only 3 people on my subcommittee. We couldn't communicate with each other by group email. Everything had to be done under the public watch. So that's really challenging. If you think about it, I'm sure the JCRC, when you do business, it's like, well, I'll talk to so-and-so, let's see the other person. This is a kind of a natural function of how we do business. We couldn't do that, you know, with the commission because of FOIA regulations. And that was kind of an introduction to me, because I never served in government before, but these are the rules that government business is subjected to.
Yeah, no, and I think that's an important point for our community to understand, that what the rules were that governed the commission's work. And I really do encourage people in the chat is the full report of the commission, and I think it's on page 18 to 24 are the specific recommendations, and in some ways it serves as a blueprint for those of us who are involved in Jewish advocacy to, as you said, turn some of these suggestions and recommendations into realities. And we take that very seriously. I wanted to now turn to your specific subcommittee, the Defining Antisemitism subcommittee. And so this is a little bit of a bundled question, but bear with me. Can you share with the audience the recommendations that are included in the report that came under the the subcommittee's recommendation on defining anti-Semitism, and in particular, the IHRA, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition.
Yeah, this is okay. Specifically underneath the rubric of the subcommittee that I chair, definitions and scope of anti-Semitism, there were several items, although let me hasten to add that we all knew that there's an overlap between some of the enumerated subject areas of the commission's work. And so, we had a definition subcommittee. We also had a law enforcement subcommittee, and they might be working on overlapping issues. And that's all to the better, because then you get different perspectives on the same issue. So the big ticket item, and in fact, this was recommendation number 1 in the commission report, and I would encourage everyone, you're sharing the link, I guess, with the governor's report. Our report to the governor, issued on December 1st, contains 21 enumerated recommendations that are all listed in the report, so everyone can take a look. It's posted online. But the big ticket item was the working definition. There it is on the screen. IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, and just to clarify again, this is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism. And what is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance? It's an international coalition of about 36 countries, give or take, including the United States, including Israel, and including many countries in Europe and Latin America. It's a commission that deals with different aspects of Holocaust remembrance. But in 2016, they formally adopted this definition that you see on your screen now. And by the way, this is part of the definition. That definition, this is the crux of it, but it's accompanied by a set of contemporary examples which illustrate modern manifestations of anti-Semitism. So what you're seeing is sort of the lead, but it's not the full definition. So that should be made clear. So our recommendation was that the Virginia government formally adopt the IHRA working definition, as many entities at the local, state, national, and international level have done, and that it incorporate, that it put this working definition into practice in schools and on campuses. How? Not by criminalizing anti-Semitic incidents. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about using this working definition as an educational tool to determine when anti-Semitism has taken place. And this is a very important part of the work of combating anti-Semitism, because for so long now, the last 20 years or so, when anti-Semitism really ramped up on the global level, there's been a real challenge of identifying exactly what anti-Semitism is. I think, Sylvia, you said in a rhetorical way, we all know, what anti-Semitism is. Well, I think for Jews, it's like the Justice Potter Stewart definition of pornography. We know it when we see it. And I think that's how Jews feel. For the rest of the world, no, I mean, they don't really know it how we see it. And when we had, for example, harassment of Jews on college campuses because of an uproar about, because of a flare-up in the Middle East, we had university administrators dismiss this. They would say, well, this is a political discussion. We don't engage in politics. So they wouldn't confront it. And so, to have a working definition like this, it really forms the backbone of our efforts. If you don't know what anti-Semitism is, you can't effectively confront it, you can't monitor it and track it, the way that you need to, which is also part of the recommendations of this commission. So it's really the linchpin of our efforts to combat anti-Semitism. So this was a key piece of the recommendations, and then also to incorporate the principles that were contained in a 2019 White House executive order on anti-Semitism, which we're still waiting to be codified on the federal level, but we'd like to see codified on the state level. The notion that Jews are a protected class under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, of 1964, and they deserve the same protections that other groups do based on ancestry or shared ethnic characteristics. And so that was part of the recommendations. Beyond that, there are, with respect to the scope of the problem, we're having a hard time right now measuring the scope of the problem, because there are a lot of law enforcement agencies that are not meeting their reporting requirements. Part of it is they might not really know fully what anti-Semitism is, what does hate crime look like. And so we recommended that there be better police training and reporting requirements so we could better track the problem. This is true in Virginia, it's true on the federal level. So we need to have that. Another piece of what our subcommittee did was the study of anti-Semitism in the law. It's a very understudied aspect. What are the legal implications of fighting anti-Semitism? And so we would like to see an academic center for the study of anti-Semitism in the law, that this is something that could be housed in one of Virginia's publicly funded law schools. We don't have too many of those, but I think we have at least three, UVA, William & Mary, and George Mason. And UVA, because of the history in Charlottesville with the white supremacist march 5+ years ago, 5.5 years ago, could be a natural home for this. But we would like to see increased support for the academic study of anti-Semitism in the law. So these were some of the items under the rubric of definition and scope.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, I strongly encourage folks to look at the report, and the recommendations of the commission are together in chapter or part 9 on pages 18. And again, it can serve as a blueprint for many years, because this is not going to all happen overnight to implement these recommendations, whether it's through the governor's executive order, through an appropriations process, through a legislative process. It all doesn't require legislation. Some of it can be done through the administrative process or through agencies making those decisions to, for example, improve training, et cetera. But I did want to dig a little deeper into the issue of using the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, because I was a little confused when I look at their website and our slide, but I'm on their website now, and it specifically says it's a non-legally binding definition to be used for educational purposes. So I understand, using it as an executive order or for administrative purposes, but if it specifically says non-legally binding, why did the commission go ahead and say we should legislate it?
Well, this we're saying that this is the working definition of anti-Semitism that should be used by educators and administrators on campuses and schools to determine whether anti-Semitism is taking place, or even in workplaces to determine whether anti-Semitism is taking place. Again, there needs to be an understanding of the problem and its manifestations before you take steps to address it. There's no directive about what must be done to address these instances. It's simply a requirement that this be the standard by which these instances are judged. And so that's the importance of it. These are principles that were contained in a congressional legislation called the Antisemitism Awareness Act that was never passed by Congress, but these principles were also contained in that 2019 White House executive order that I referenced. It's simply saying this is where you go to apply an educational non-binding tool to determine whether anti-Semitism is taking place. And I think that's a sound approach.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think there's widespread agreement that it is a wonderful educational tool and can be very helpful for governments, local, regional, state governments to use as an educational tool. I guess the confusion and some concern is it specifically says non-legally binding. So it's for educational purposes. And some of the examples are, it specifically says to use these examples or serve as illustrations. So that's where I know in our community, there's been some discussion, support for using it, but not necessarily understanding of the need for legislation.
Yeah, Amy, if I may, I think it's really important to address this point, because I think that there are people who are within our community, people who are allies of the community, who want to be allies, and say, whoa, wait, what's going on here? And like one of the common criticisms or rhetorical arguments against the IHRA working definition is, well, it chills free speech, because a lot of these manifestations that are contained in the contemporary examples of anti-Semitism are it had to do with anti-Israel hatred. And, some would say, well, isn't this just an effort to stifle criticism of Israel? It's not true. It's not true. We need to push back again. This is a distortion of what the IHRA working definition does. And I would, if you read the IHRA working definition in all its elements, it explicitly says that criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic. Now, what the IHRA working definition addresses is criticism of Israel that crosses the line into anti-Semitism, and that incorporates some of these classical anti-Semitic aspects that are covered in the survey that was referenced earlier. So it's in and of itself, criticizing Israel, this is something Israeli government policy. This is something Israeli citizens do every day.
Sure, we know this. Yeah,
we do this with our own government. This is part of living in a democracy. But no, that the hatred, the vociferous hatred of Israel, the denial of Israel's right to exist, the double standards applied to Israel, the demonization of Israel that's just calculated to cast it as a pariah state. These are manifestations of anti-Semitism. So that's why it's important to be clear about this, but really, those of us who want to fight anti-Semitism and those of us who support Israel's existence, even if whether we support all of Israel's policies is irrelevant to this discussion. It's important to delineate these aspects of anti-Semitism.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Fussfield. We are going to bring you back for the discussion at the top of the hour, but now I'm going to turn to you, Adam, bring you into the conversation, and want to hear from you from your national perspective, working at Jewish Federations of North America. I know you've been working with many states, navigating these waters, and you've been working with communities across America threatened by anti-Semitism. And so tell us a little bit about your experience and how other states, communities have been using the IHRA definition and how it has been helpful in those places. we need to unmute Adam.
Thank you so much. First of all, Amy, it's so good to see you again. We got to spend some really important and quality time together in Athens, Greece, with Mayor Stoney of Richmond, who is just an absolute tremendous example of leadership. Everything that I got, everything I got to know about him demonstrates he's a mensch in every sense of the term. And what I think is so powerful, and now a chance to be a part of today's call with the Richmond community, they should all know just how in great hands they are with you at the helm and with Basya in the JCRC position. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and a part of today's conversation. The IHRA definition across the United States is being used. There's no one way that it's being used. And I think that one of the things that's been very important in terms of what Rabbi Fussfield has been demonstrating here is that using the IHRA definition as a working definition to help understand the way in which anti-Semitism is showing up today can be used across civil society. Universities are adopting it in terms of their understanding of how anti-Semitism is manifesting on campus. Cities, city councils, governor's offices, and while the reference to the executive order, the administration was used, one of the big examples is the State Department. The State Department has doubled down on using the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism to understand the ways in which anti-Semitism is manifest across the world when thinking about and evaluating anti-Semitism, especially through the Special Envoy's Office to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism around the world. And what's important about all of these understandings of the manifestations of anti-Semitism is not only just domestically, but abroad. We've seen that the rise of anti-Semitism across the global scale has ripple effects here in the United States. Just a year ago, we all sat on the edge of our seats while somebody went to the Colleyville synagogue to hold the community hostage because of anti-Semitic understanding of the way in which Jews control power in the United States. But that person was a British national. So that the fact that that type of rhetoric all over the world led somebody to fly halfway across the world based on anti-Semitic views is a demonstration of why we need to be understanding and thinking about anti-Semitism in new ways. And beyond that, in terms of understanding IHRA, whether it's incorporated into, in this case, the way in which a state defines its terms, or a university defines understanding of circumstances, that's where I think, it's such an important point that Rabbi Fussfield underscored, which is that the opponents of IHRA, using as a foil this notion of First Amendment free speech rights, is attacking the very ability for us, the Jewish community, to define anti-Semitism. And so there are about 38 states that have adopted IHRA in some capacity, whether it's by legislation or executive order from the governor's office. Dozens of other cities by mayors and other sorts of opportunities down at the local level, including just recently in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles City Council, and in Montgomery County, just across the state line, where both counties adopted the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism as the definition of anti-Semitism when understanding certain occurrences unanimously. I'm not saying it wasn't without bruises, and I'm not saying it wasn't a debate, but there are times where there are debates worth having. And I think the ability for us to lead with confidence that those who get to define anti-Semitism is the Jewish community is a debate worth having.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I wanted you to kind of explore also the IHRA definition that I did ask Rabbi Fussfield about, in terms of how you can use it in very different ways. And again, there's much support for letting the Jewish community define what anti-Semitism is, and not letting someone else define it for us, but that it was designed as an educational tool and non-legally binding. My understanding is that for example, the U.S. reform movement supports the definition to use as educational, but not to make it legally binding. Can you explain some of the issues regarding how some states have used it as an educational tool and not legally binding, and some of the pitfalls that have been experienced in other places?
Absolutely. I think that there is still an aspect here of the allowing others to define the parameters of the way in which this is being used. Because even the way that the states have legislated, meaning they've adopted the definition into their definitions section of legislation, is not therefore criminalizing anti-Semitism. It is not therefore making it so that anybody who has a First Amendment right to hate Jews, there's the Skokie Supreme Court case that the Nazi Party is allowed by their First Amendment free speech to march through the streets of Skokie, Illinois. So too here, that even in the context of having the IHRA definition adopted into a definitional part of the legislative body, does not criminalize or make illegal somebody having these opinions. What it does is it's a layering effect that, in the context of somebody, there has to first be some sort of incident that needs to be evaluated. So just policing thought, that's part of why this is such a foil. Just saying that I believe that the Jews control the world and control the media, that's not a criminal effect, and you can't legislate that away. But what the IHRA definition is used to interpret is, in the case of, let's use an assault or vandalism, that somebody walks up to a person who is visibly Jewish, wearing a yarmulke, tzitzit hanging out, and assaults them, physically assaults them, or harasses them to the point where, like, by the definition of harassment, this person is being harassed. That's something that needs to be investigated, that whether or not it's an assault or harassment, and there's something to investigate there. The hate crimes piece, or the opportunity to understand at a secondary level, is to understand intention. Now, if somebody is visibly Jewish, walking down the street, gets harassed, gets assaulted, God forbid, it may be that person just got assaulted. Wrong place, wrong time, they're attacked. Now, if that person is shouting while they're attacking anti-Semitic slurs, derogatory terms about being Jewish, takes that person's kippah, throws it on the floor and steps on it and talks about, in the moment, you effing this and whatever. Now, all of a sudden, it's not just an assault. It's looked at, is this a hate crime? During the act, this person perpetuating the crime added this other context. Let's understand whether or not it's just an assault or a hate crime. That with IHRA, what we're adding into today's parlance is, in the exact same situation, rather than saying "you dirty Jew," which we know is such an anti-Semitic slur, they start calling that person a Zionist, or they say, we're beating you up because of the way that Israel is treating the Palestinians. Well, is that a hate crime, or is that not? And so incorporating and adopting the IHRA definition into a body to be able to add this definition, this context, into what is happening in society, that's what's trying to be adopted here. And just to take one more step at those who are trying to use this as a foil, first, I think that oftentimes there are token Jewish voices. In other words, the Neturei Karta, who is an infamously anti-Zionist group, but they are visibly and they are in practice Orthodox Jews. But they are, I worked at AIPAC for a decade. They stand outside the policy conference wearing keffiyehs and waving Palestinian flags and talking about the destruction of the Jewish state of Israel. Well, would anybody agree that they are the representative voice of the Jewish community in terms of views of Zionism? So there are certain people who are using a token Jewish voice to use as a foil for IHRA, saying, you're trying to legislate my free speech. The other side of it, and this goes to the point of allow for the Jewish community to be part of defining for ourselves what is anti-Semitism, is that opponents of I guess I should say the anti-Semitic tendency in this effort to discredit IHRA in the way that it's being discredited in the United States is to try and say, you're trying to tell me that my anti-Semitic views are anti-Semitic, but I'm telling you that they're not anti-Semitic, and therefore you can't tell me that my anti-Semitism is not anti-Semitism. And so that's part of the difficulty of today's conversation. And unfortunately, in a politicized environment where I don't know that there's a single issue that any of us can discuss hasn't somehow been politicized, even the ability to define one's definition of hatred is under partisan politics.
Thank you. I know that was a lot to parse through, and I think bottom line is, and I'm speaking for myself, but also as chair of JCRC, we want to depoliticize this issue. We want to be effective for the Jewish community statewide, Commonwealth-wide. Do you have any advice for us as we do face this General Assembly, where there are now just recently bills to codify this? And what is your advice to navigate this going forward?
I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege in answering that question to take one zoom out to talk about a little bit from JFNA's perspective, because it's obviously we zoom in on this very specific debate, but taking a step back in terms of understanding that at this moment, we know that of all of the issues facing the Jewish community, and especially with the rise of anti-Semitism, safety and security is a paramount concern for us, which we know in terms of the assaults happening in New York. In New York right now, we know about physical assaults across the United States, that we need to ensure that our places of worship, that our places of gathering are safe. It's an unfortunate reality of this moment right now, which is why the Jewish Federation's working with an organization we helped found, the Secure Communities Network, is building out the Live Secure network, ensuring that every single Jewish community has the infrastructure that they need to physically keep their communities safe. Well, so too, the second wing of that plane of safety and security is combating anti-Semitism and Israel delegitimization, because those seeking to push the Jewish community outside of the bounds of acceptable society imperil the Jewish community. That this is our history teaching us that while it doesn't repeat itself, it doesn't always look the exact same. This is when history rhymes. That if the Jewish community is seen as all of the conspiracies that we know anti-Semitism is built upon, then the Jewish community no longer has a seat at the table. And there's that very catchy phrase, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so the Jewish community must combat these misperceptions of the Jewish community across the spectrum, whether it's the anti-Semitic tropes of the Great Replacement theory that the Jews are pulling the strings for the replacement of white America, all the way to this notion that Israel, by virtue of existence, is a colonialist enterprise that is oppressing an indigenous people. And across the board, these conspiracy theories must be addressed. And so this is where I come back to the answer to your question, which is deep, authentic community relations. That community relations, this notion seems to be one that is a soft, touchy-feely, kumbaya reality, when in fact it could not be more opposite. Effective community relations require sophistication, strategy, direction, engagement. It is an active verb. And the work that you are doing through the JCRCs across the United States, but especially right now, we're talking about this moment in Richmond, is to show up in all of these spaces authentically Jewish, proudly Jewish, for the betterment of the community. in this moment, with the definition of the IHRA definition, but in combating anti-Semitism, history has taught us that when anti-Semitism is the starting place, it's never the end. It's never the ending place. And so, what are ways that the Jewish community, sharing our experience and our history with our local communities, can we make the entire community stronger? So, in this particular instance, to directly address your question, I would say first and foremost, a deep personal research and understanding. The fact that on a Thursday afternoon, when you could be doing literally anything, you're on a Zoom call listening to us, I think is a testament to you taking that first step. And there has to be even more, because if we're just exploring any issue that we're facing today by the headlines that exist in social media, and I can tell you up and down the spectrum and across social media, the reports that have demonstrated that people only read headlines, they don't actually read an article, and headlines are designed to be misleading. And so there's an important effort here of really understanding the issues, and then through authentic relationship, working to engage and educate community members, family members, legislators about issues so that they are equipped as the decision makers to make the best possible decision with all information. That it is on us to make sure that they are not making decisions simply based on a headline.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I didn't ask you in advance to give a plug for Jewish Advocacy Day, which is February 8th, but that is an opportunity where all members of our community can speak up, speak out, and meet with their legislators and delegates. And thank you, Winston. So there was also links on our website, but that is a QR code. If you haven't used a QR code, you literally just hold up your cell phone on the picture mode and right up to that black and white box, and you'll get the registration information. We could also put the link in the chat as well. But this is, if you're not familiar, where we will continue education about these issues, and where it's an opportunity to meet with all of our delegates and senators on the same day, and right in the middle of a legislative session to talk about these issues. So really important to show up. One final question before we shift to more of an interactive dialogue, and I see there are questions in the chat. Are there any? I know, Adam, you were your colleague was sick today, so you came on just today. So if you haven't had a chance to look through more recently the recommendations from the commission, the Virginia Commission on Antisemitism, were there any other recommendations that you thought were of most interest, either from looking at it from nationally, or what you think are sort of the low-hanging fruit that makes sense to move forward? In particular, I mean, we have heard about, and the rabbi mentioned it, the importance of data collection.
Well, first of all, I could not agree more about in terms of data collection. All of this doesn't we can't understand the scope unless we have the data. And we just learned about a month ago that there was a massive underreporting of hate crimes this year for, I mean, all sorts of reasons. I don't need to get into all of the details here in this moment in the call, but suffice it to say, there is a gap in data. We need to do more in terms of data collection and data research. Jewish Federations has worked to incentivize data collection and data reporting through the Jabara Hire No Hate Act, which we were a big lead on about a year and a half ago at this point, maybe just under 2 years ago. So I do think that, and I would also just conceptually say that speaking from my own personal experience, and also I know this talking to a number of people, that it can feel very uncomfortable with the spotlight on the Jewish community, no matter where the spotlight is coming from, whether it's the fact that there is a rise of anti-Semitism, or also the fact that now there is a congressional, bipartisan, bicameral task force to address anti-Semitism, that there is a commission in Virginia and there are commissions across states, including through Holocaust centers and universities, to understand and to address anti-Semitism. And most recently, of course, the announcement from the Biden administration, the development of an interagency task force to address anti-Semitism, that it can feel like, why in this moment are we the ones that are getting this special attention, and it can feel uncomfortable. And from my own personal perspective and my own opinion, I would say that delving into a commission like this and understanding why there are many people who recognize from historical experience that anti-Semitism is a pernicious threat that does not end with the just Jewish hatred. To go back again to quote Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, who is one of the world's foremost scholars on understanding Holocaust history, but in particular anti-Semitism, is that anti-Semitism, unlike other hatreds, is not just based on a superficial or singular thing. It is based on a conspiracy, and the conspiracy can evolve, it can metastasize, and those conspiracies link to the unraveling of the very fabrics of our democracy and democracies around the world. And so therefore, the fact that there are efforts like this, I think are laudable, commendable, and we should really study what they are recommending and engage with them in meaningful ways. So by the way, so that if we need to make recommendations or suggestions or modify, we are at the table having those conversations.
Amy, can I add something under the category of low-hanging fruit?
Sure.
Just to sort of put a face on some of the items that might come down the legislative pike. One of the recommendations that came out of the subcommittee that I chaired was a prohibition on academic boycotts based on nationality. Not even referencing Israel or any one country, but in other words, the Graduate Student Senate at Virginia Tech called for a ban on Israeli academics, exchange programs with Israel, so forth. Why? Because it's Israel, and they're opposed to the Jewish state. Now, in the name of academic inquiry and openness, I think we really need to stop this kind of discrimination based on nationality. And so I think that this was a recommendation. I think this is something that I hope to see move forward through the legislature this year. And I hope it's something that the Richmond JCRC will be able to support as it does so.
Yeah, well, we are quite familiar with the incident at Virginia Tech, and we're very involved in working with the Hillel there and the students there to support them and outreach to the administration on several occasions about that incident.
Good.
So yes, we will be looking through all of the different recommendations and working with both members of the General Assembly, but also the administration to see what is possible through a variety of tools. And I just wanted to revisit Adam's comment about the Secure Community Network. We are incredibly grateful with our partnership with the Secure Community Network. We have invested in the Secure Community Network and have a David Brackens here on staff at the Federation that provides security trainings throughout our community and have helped secure grants on behalf of many of our local synagogues and other Jewish institutions to help better secure the Jewish infrastructure here. And on the state level, we've worked really hard to create a state level funding to help support Jewish security. And now I'm going to turn it over for this moderated portion of the dialogue to the CEO of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond, Daniel Staffenberg. And just wanted to thank Rabbi Fussfield and Adam. Look forward to hopefully working with you and consulting with you in this coming year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to say thank you, Amy, who has led us for the past many years beautifully as our chair. And I know many in the room, and there's well over 40, 45 of us, appreciate your wisdom every day. Eric, Adam, thank you very much. There's one question that I think is really timely in the chat, and I would encourage anybody else, if you have a question, we still have 5-10 minutes. If we'd like, happy to share. And we began to touch on it around the impact of social media in contributing to and amplifying anti-Semitic messages. The question from Sandy was specifically, how far can we or should laws go in terms of shutting down those messages? I know it is a challenge with free speech. Eric, you want to start us off on that?
Well, it is a challenge, and this is something that's been an ongoing point of discussion with our European counterparts who have, I mean, people should understand, in countries like Germany, for example, for good reason, it is against the law to deny the Holocaust. It is against the law to use, Nazi symbols like a swastika. And that's because of the historical and cultural context there. Now, we can't pass those kind of laws here because of our First Amendment, and that's our own historical context, political context, and we wouldn't change it. The First Amendment is very precious to us. However, what we can do is rely on the stigmatization of anti-Semitic speech, hate speech, and this starts with the giants of the social media world, the Facebooks and Googles and so forth, the portals that transmit content, and we can challenge them to not give a home to anti-Semitic speech, and it is, we've discussions between Jewish organizations and Facebook, for example, and some of the other social media actors are ongoing. They have content standards that allow them to sift through. For example, Holocaust denial is just been rampant on social media. It doesn't have to be, and by adjusting their content standards, they can weed some of this out. Facebook doesn't have to give a home to Holocaust denial, or nor does Twitter or any of the others. But so we work with them on this. And it's really also about other figures, other companies, like, for example, Adidas had a contract with Kanye West, I call him, but they had a contract with Kanye, and it was expected of them. Maybe they just took it upon themselves. I'm sure they heard from many people that they needed to cut ties with him, and they did, and that sent a signal. So it's really more in a First Amendment context. It's more about the stigmatization than the outlawing.
Adam?
I agree in terms of most of, pretty much all of what Rabbi Fussfield said. The only thing I would just add on that is understanding the social media milieu right now. The anti-Semitism is only a small part of the challenges with misinformation, disinformation that exists on the social media platforms. And you just have to be a passive observer of the fights between the heads of these social media companies in Congress in terms of trying to demonstrate and understand the spread of hate on these platforms. And frankly, just the way that the platforms are set up, they're incentivized to be I can't think of my word right now, but they're incentivized to spread this type of hate, to keep eyeballs in and get people all ginned up, and that's how. So I would say that I had a couple. One recommendation on the social media front, which is, without for a moment taking our eye off the ball, recognizing that the social media space, in terms of radicalizing people, in terms of the ability to recruit people to radical positions, is a very real threat, and we must understand how to address it. I also recommend, whether it's on Shabbat or some other way, to put our phones down and walk away take a walk around the block and not spend as much time doom scrolling, because I think that as much as it is about our ability to work and address the problems with the spread of hate on these social media platforms, it is also incumbent upon us to not get sucked into it, so that our mental acuity and our brain space and our emotional energy is consumed by, really, it's not even all real. A lot of this is bots. A lot of this is just algorithms, and it's not real.
So I'm gonna give it one more second. Thank you both. Thank God for Shabbat in so many ways, which
Amen.
is any last questions before I make some final remarks? I'm not seeing anyone. I will monitor the chat as I do this. I want to first again thank Sylvia and Amy Melnick-Sharp for their leadership of this program, and Rabbi Eric and Adam, our friends, our partners. Thank you for both of your leadership, and I think truly important and information for our community. For those that are new to us, the JCRC is really our community, and our JCRC seeks representation from the broadest scopes of the community, our institutions, and our community members. We are here and we'd love to hear from you, and more importantly, get you involved in the CRC. It is about joining a community voice together, and doing some of the wrestling you're hearing is going on in the background. Additionally, please join us at Jewish Advocacy Day, February 8th. It is our critical day on the Hill, and I want to say that we join with our entire Jewish Commonwealth, Tidewater Jewish community, Peninsula and Northern Virginia. And this year, there is much work to do and our voices need to be heard. Lastly, I want to reinforce that we are in this work together with our interfaith and partners throughout the community, the Black, the Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Catholic, all of those faiths. We are very clearly and closely working together to build and sustain those relationships. And our effort, as we have focused today on anti-Semitism, we recognize, as Adam and Eric both said, that anti-Semitism is the start of hate in other ways. And we always need to stand up together against all hate. And that is really what our JCRC is doing. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to wish you a good Thursday and an early Shabbat Shalom. Please visit jewishrichmond.org if you'd like to learn more, or reach out to any one of us here at the Federation. Thank you all very, very much. Eric, Adam, have a wonderful day, and thank you for informing us today.